What is arch? Arch fingerprint have ridges that forms a hill. Some arches looks like they have a pointed tent shape. Arches are the least common type of fingerprint. Arches comes in two types, plain or tented, and arches by definition have no deltas. Plain arch classified as AA. A plain arch is the type of pattern in which ridges enter upon one side, makes a rise or a wave in the center and flows or tend to flow out upon the opposite side. Tented arch classified as T. A tinted arch is the type of pattern which possesses either an angle and upthrust or two of the three basic characteristic of the loop. Angular type tented arch. 1. Formed by two ridges meeting at an angle. 2. One continuous ridge cannot form an angle. And 3. Angle must be 90 degrees or less. Upthrust type tented arch. 1. An upthrust must be an ending ridge, a ridge which ends in space. 2. An upthrust must make a definite change of direction from the basic ridge. It must be an angle of 45 degrees or more from base ridge. And 3. An upthrust must be as high as the surrounding ridges are thick. Loop type, lacking one characteristic. 1. One which approaches the loop. 2. May have any combination of two of the three basic loop characteristics. 3. Lacking the third. Note, these three loop characteristics are, to repeat, A sufficient recurve, B, a delta, C, a ridge count across a looping ridge. What is loop? A loop is that type of fingerprint pattern in which one or more of the ridges enter on either side of the impression, recurve, touch or pass an imaginary line drawn from the delta to the core, and terminate or tend to terminate on or toward the same side of the impression from whence such ridge or ridges entered. Loop patterns. 1. One or more ridges enter upon either side. 2. Recurve. 3. Touch or pass an imaginary line between delta and core. And 4. Pass out or tend to pass out upon the same side the ridges entered. Basic requirements of a loop. 1. Sufficient recurve. 2. Delta. And 3. Ridge count across a looping ridge. This is an example of a loop. The fingerprint image on the screen has three basic requirements to consider it a loop. First, it has a sufficient recurve. Second, it has a delta. And lastly, it also have a ridge count across a looping ridge. This fingerprint image is not a loop, as it failed to comply the three basic requirements of a loop. As you can see in the image, there is a spoiled recurve. This means that it doesn't have a sufficient recurve, which is one of the three basic elements or requirements of a loop. What is whorl? A whorl is a fingerprint pattern that consists of one or more ridges that form a circuit and are surrounded by two deltas. Whorl tracings. Tracing refers to the positions of the deltas in a whorl relative to each other. Tracing are either inner or I, outer or O, and meeting or M. This is how to trace a whorl. 1. Trace from left delta to a point opposite to the right delta. 2. Trace from the farthest left delta to a point opposite the farthest right delta when there are 3 or more deltas present. 3. Drop down at ending ridge, follow the lower fork of a bifurcation. 4. Stop at the point opposite the right delta and count ridge between that point and a delta. 5. If there are 3 or more ridges inside the right delta, the tracing is ni or inner. 6. If there are 3 or more ridges outside the right delta, that tracing is no or outer. 7. If there are 1 or 2 ridges either inside or outside the right delta, or if the tracing stop on the right delta itself, the tracing is an MO meeting. 8. It is not necessary to count more than 3 ridges. This is an example of a meeting tracing because, as you can see, the tracing line, which is that green line, you can see there the tracing line meet or stop at the right delta, which makes it an M or meeting tracing. This is an example of an inner tracing because the tracing line goes into the right delta, which makes it an I, or inner tracing. This is an example of an outer tracing because that tracing line goes outside the right delta, which makes it an O, or outer tracing. That ends our video discussion about arch, loop, classifying loops, and whorl. Thank you for watching.